Oh, he has a comfortable chair? Okay. Okay, no, I thought maybe you'd like this chair.
No, fine.
It's has a soft cushion.
It's fine.
Okay.
I'm fine. Thank you very much. So, Chodesh Tov L'Chulam. I'd like to divide the Shir into two parts. The Shir for this month. As a basic text, I want to introduce you to the methodology of the Gemara. Today we know it's being increasingly recognized that the power of thought, which has always been very intensive amongst the people of Israel, and we see until today that investigations have been made by many at the frontiers of human thought, who have wondered why is it that the people of Israel have produced an enormous ratio of great scientists, Nobel Prize winners, far more than any other group, and people are beginning to understand this is not due to any form of particular racial aspect. As we know, the Jewish nation contains many different races. There have been many periods of enormous Protestantization. Now we know even some of the great leaders of the Jewish people did not come from the original group of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov from a racial point of view, but have become part of the Jewish people. And there have been many research papers made on the high level of increasing the power of the mind from the study of the Talmud. So much so, there's one group of non-Jews in Korea who decided that they're introducing Talmudical studies in general for the population because it increases the power of the human mind. Now, there are a number of aspects to this which is worthwhile our deeper study. And we're going to do it on the basis of the deeper analysis of the procedure of thought, which is inherent both in the written text of the Torah and in the other books of the Bible, and which is specifically inherent also in the oral tradition, which was introduced in the Talmud Bavli and Yerushalmi. And I'm going to do it by means of a deeper analysis of the contribution of Moshe Haim Luzzatto to an understanding of the methodology of the oral tradition, the Gemara, and to understand the power of this enormous genius who lived 300 years ago and lived a short life of 40 years. But during that life, already when he was a youngster, a boy of 12, he already composed quite a lot of important writings. And his writings were very wide and very deep in a pure Hebrew. In fact, when somebody wants to understand the development of modern Hebrew, one of the great links are the works of Moshe Haim Luzzatto, who was a master of the language. Now, the work of Moshe Luzzatto, which is best known, the Mesilat Yesharim, which deals with the steps towards developing a saintly character and saintly behavior. It is an ethical work. The edition that has become very widespread does not bring any sources from the Kabbalah, because it's purely based upon the Tanakh, the written text of the Torah, and also the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the works of the sages, that although there are many mystical midrashim incorporated also in the Talmud, but on the whole they can be taken as allegories without going into what's known as the pardas, go into the secret aspect of the Torah. He at a young age was already a master of human thought altogether, and also became acquainted with the Kabbalistic teachings of the Zohar and the Arizal. He based many of his works on a deep analysis of Kabbalah. Many of them have only been edited in a strict manner from different manuscripts in recent times. So we have as the most popular works of him, Mesilat Yesharim, which is the path of the upright, how to become an upright person. This term is based upon what it says at the end of the book of Helet, that Halakim Asayt Adam Yashar, God made man to become upright and truthful. Unfortunately, they often go astray. So this is the path which is really based upon a Braita of Pinchas ben Yair, one of the great saints of the Talmudic age. And he shows us how to reach a high level of perfection. To show the enormous influence of Mesilat Yesharim, the Gaon of Vilna, who mastered by heart all sources of Torah thought. He said if he would still be alive, Moshe Luzzatto, he would walk by foot from Vilna to Padua to sit at his feet. And it's also we know that the Hasidic movements also took a great deal, especially from the more Kabbalistic works. The second work which is popular is Derech Hashem, the path of Hashem, where he speaks about more the philosophical basis of the Torah approach to life, the path that leads us to closest to Hashem, to understand Hashem's relationship with man. But today, I'm going to start presenting to you the calls Derech HaKodesh, which is a threefold work, how to reach holiness, but it's basically how to reach holiness through the study of Gemara. And since now we've chosen also as the tractate to be studied, the study of the first tractate of Brachot, which is a section of the Talmud which has great practical significance to all of us, as introducing us into the blessings we have to say, and also into the mitzvah of reading the Shema. So, which is the method on which all our halakha is based? The method is described in the Talmud. It's very interesting. The Talmud, we know, stretches the mind enormously. I mean, I'll give you a personal episode which illustrates this. The most advanced grammar school in England is the Manchester Grammar School. And when I was a rabbi in Manchester, I became the chaplain for the Jewish students, and many parents, even if they were religious at that time, if their sons were bright and they were able to get a scholarship to get to Manchester Grammar School, they sent them there. They had the highest record of successful candidates to enter into Oxbridge and to the Ivy League colleges, America, Yale, and Harvard. So I gave a shiur there to some of these students in Gemara when they were in the scholarship year, that means to strive to obtain these higher level scholarships. And many of the parents said, why do you teach them Gemara and take them away from their preparation to get the highest marks, to get these scholarships, to get into these higher colleges? So the Haim, the headmaster of that school, gave me a letter to say that he would like all these students to continue their Talmud study. And he saw that if they learn Talmud, they're more successful in all the examinations. Of course, it's well known. It's well known here, even here in Israel. There's recently many campaigns against freeing people for Talmud study who are in yeshivot and kollalim. But I think even the most not yet religious members of the Knesset, they all agreed that we've got to allow a minimum number. They decided, I think, on 1,800 of the brightest students in the kollalim. They should be freed entirely from any army service, but this is very important for the intellectual future of the Jewish people in Israel. It's well known also in America, it's well known everywhere. The Jews have this innate power, which comes from learning the Gemara. And even the non-Jews recognize it. So therefore, in the way of Torah, let me go back to things, there's a rabbi, Dr. What's his name?
David Sackton?
Dr. David Sackton. He's got a philosophical background, and the diaspora yeshiva, he together with Haim, they made a beautiful edition of this way of the Torah. The way of the Torah, the Derech HaKodesh, is divided into three parts. The first is Derech Tevunot, which is the ways of reason, which is a book on logic. Logic on a very deep level. But it's the ways of reason, he calls it. Sefer Gayon is called the book of logic. Sefer Amalith is called the book of words. And to understand this more deeply, I'm going to want to introduce you to this. But before coming on to it, we will start with the Derech Tevunot.
What's the third book called?
Third book is called the Book of Words, Sefer Amalith.
That's what's the... Okay, so we've got word, we've got
You
reason. What's the third?
I've also put it here on the whiteboard. So what I want to do now is, before going more deeply, understanding his particular path that he's taken, to explain to you how important in Torah tradition is understanding. You know, why is it in our daily prayer, say 3 times a day, which is the first request to Hashem? You give human beings understanding, bina, various expressions of knowledge, which we can define more closely soon. But just to show you this, I'd like you to look on page 1 of the Jerusalem Bible and see what it says here in verse 26. You know, verse 26 is the creation of man, which is a hint also at the power of Shem Havaya. So it said, God said, let us make man in our form and in our image. On the word Kitmutenu, Rashi says, what does it mean, the image of God? Lahavin or lahaskil? Lahavin, to understand, and lahaskil, to become intelligent. I'd like to explain this term, lahaskil, a bit more deeply. And that, if you got Jerusalem Bible, you turn to page 247, that's Devarim, chapter 29, verse 8, it says, Shmatem et divrei habrit hazot, you should observe the word of this covenant, vasisem otam, and fulfill it. Leman taskilu et kol asher ta'asun. So that, translation is, you may prosper, but taskilu has not been prosper. Taskilu means that you will act intelligently in whatever you do. So therefore, I'm going back from this phrase in the Chumash to the interpretation of Kitmutenu. Kitmutenu means, how do you reach the image of God? God has been defined by nearly all scientists of recent times as the mind of the universe. God is this power of intelligence that runs the whole universe. It's recognized by nearly all scientists. So the mind of God has been given a part of it in the mind of man. Man is able to understand things because God has given specific understanding, lahavin, which other beings do not possess. Only the human being possesses such a power of the mind. And what does lahaskil mean? So we see lahaskil means to put that knowledge into practice. Seichel means there are many people of understanding, but in practice they are stupid because they don't apply their understanding to their behavior. Their behavior got nothing to do with their understanding. So this is the essence of the Torah. The Torah gives us the power of understanding in order to apply it in our behavior as individuals, in our behavior as a nation, behavior as human beings, part of the human race. When professors and lawyers and scientists, they use their great understanding to destroy life or to produce methods of destroying hundreds of human beings and maybe even of life on this planet. So this is a misapplication of seichel, which is according to the deep aspect of this Hebrew language, which is a very deep language. You have in Hebrew the word sachal. It's basically the same consonants as seichel. It's called the ambivalence principle, which exists in human psychology and also exists in the Hebrew language. That you've got a certain power, very great intelligence, and then you abuse it, then you turn it into the opposite. Because everything in the world is given with poles. So you've got a high pole of intelligence, and you go and use it for the lowest pole of destruction. So that's where it said, Man taskilu et kosher ta'asun. That's one aspect. Then there is, if you look a bit further, in Bereshit, concerning creation of man, it says, says in chapter 2, on verse 7, which you'll find on page 2 of the Jerusalem Bible. There it says that Hashem Elokim formed man, afar min hadamah, vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim, and he breathed into his face the breath of life. Vahi adam nefesh chaya, and the human being became a living soul. Nefesh chaya, so Rashi says, af behema v'chaya nefesh chaya. Animals also called the living souls. Azu shel adam chaya sheb'chulam. But the power of the soul given to the human being is the most lively one of all of them. Shenitvaset potea v'dibur. Animals, also called, they've got a life power of growth, of 5 senses. Some of the senses they have even more acute than the human being, like the sense of smell, many of them, and other senses. So physically, the animal world possesses nefesh chaya. But with the human being, it's chaya sheb'chulam. There's attitude, deya, which means knowledge, v'dibur, and speech. The power of speech and human communication on the highest level is given to the human being. It's got deya v'dibur. That's why also the earliest translation of Vahi Adam Nefesh Chaya, what before he wasn't Nefesh Chaya. Without that, without the soul, he was like an animal. The animal also have a Nefesh Chaya. The human being has it on the highest level. And this highest level influences the senses as well. So this is a deep concept of the power of speech. That speech is not just the index of the mind. Speech is the way in which the human being increases the power of his mind. So this explains a little bit how the ways of reason and logic culminates in the book of words, analysis of the words. So I think this is an important principle, that through understanding and seeing and applying it on the highest level, the power of speech, we come to the highest level also of development of the mind. So, before coming directly to the work of Moshe Haim Luzzatto, I want to compare it also to the work of the Rambam. Perhaps you were not aware of it so much. The Rambam wrote a work called Milot Higayon, Words of Logic. If one understands the significance of all this discussion for today, in modern philosophy, there's a lot of discussion that many of the differences of opinion between the philosophers is because they don't define their words clearly. The way they speak about freedom, they mean different things. They speak about the soul, they mean different things. And they have arguments, but the arguments, you analyze them deeply, they are verbal arguments. That's why, let's say, with major discussions of recent times concerning philosophy is in the area of semantics. Like a classic in modern philosophy is language and truth. How far are they related? In other words, often discussion not really truth. When a person grasps hold of certain words, he's got different idea than the other one what that word means. And therefore it's very important, from a scientific point of view, you've all got to define clearly what is the meaning of the words they're using, if you really want to reach the truth. So, this is what the Rambam had in mind as well when he wrote the Book of Logic. Before he wrote the Guide for the Perplexed, and before he wrote also his commentary and his foremost work of the Yad HaChazakah, which is a great work of thought as well as a practice of Torah, his Mishneh Torah. So, I suppose many of you have heard that when you come to learn Gemara, there's such a thing as just translating it, understanding basically what the terms mean, which you can get from ArtScroll. But then there's another aspect to understand it more deeply, which in the Gemara itself is called two types of things. There's girsa, to read it, and then there's to understand it. Even the word Gemara means to learn what you have received, what you've learned from your teacher and from the writings, to learn what is said. But the Gemara says a person should first learn to read it well, understand the translation clearly. Hence the importance I always put upon people coming to the Shia well prepared with translation, and not think that people sometimes think today, if they come at a later age than those who've been educated in learning Torah from childhood, and then they think they'll take a regular Gemara and that way they'll make quick progress. It's not true. You'll make much quicker progress if you first work on translation. Make use of the translation thoroughly. And then you can start Lisba, then you can start explaining it deeply. Afterwards comes Svara. So these are the two aspects. And we know that the higher level of learning, as we will know from people in the Koilel, and some of you may have heard of Brisket Derech, but not just Brisket Derech, it's the regular Derech in most advanced yeshivot, is that you work hard at the text, and you have to work very hard also understanding it. The extreme situation was like Haim Brisk. One Seder he learned 8 pages in the morning, because he learned it a few times already, he learned 8 pages of Gemara. In the afternoon he learned 1/8 of a page. That was the average, 1/8 of a page. To learn it really you have to understand it more deeply. That's one is Bekius, and the other one is called Ion. These are the two things. Bekiut is to know what's written, and there's some people who've got a good memory, so they remember what's been written, but they don't understand it clearly. You've got to understand it. If you go into it deeply, it contains deep concepts. So they made distinctions. Now, one of the greatest minds of recent times was the Rogatchover, Yosef Rosin, the twins. So I had the zchus to have amongst my different teachers. Also, you will find in our library the Encyclopedia of Biblical Interpretation by Rabbi Nachum Kasha in English. We've got just a few volumes he wrote in English. In Hebrew, is written, I think it's written about 50 volumes. He had a photographic memory entirely on all the Talmud Bavli, Rishalmi, Midrashim. He was a disciple of this genius. Just by the side, I'll tell you, when Bialik once had the opportunity to meet, Bialik learned in Voloshin. Voloshin was the yeshiva, high standard of Iluyim, of geniuses. So he met this Yosef Rosin. He also knew about Einstein. He says, this Yosef Rosin has got a mind 100 times bigger than Einstein. That's really, he not only had a photographic memory, had fantastic insight into everything. When he gave answers to questions, he just gave people references. He had to work on it. So did Rav Kasha, he found his manuscripts in which he demonstrated that the logical work of the Rambam is really the basis for understanding Talmudic reasoning. It's very interesting. Now I'm saying all this as an introduction to this work. And to understand that Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, as we know, as many of you know from the path of the just, they're very systematic. With him everything goes in different sections. And And Moshe Luzzatto writes in his introduction, The Ways of Reason, the edifice of the Talmud like a great vast ocean, and through its mighty waves and strong currents, the truth of Torah is clarified and distilled. So I've chosen to base my building on the Talmud to ensure that my method will be successful and immutable. This is called the way of Kedusha. This accounts for the name he gave Derech HaKodesh. He said, these three works, the Ways of Reason, the Book of Logic, the Book of Words, set our course through the great sea of the Talmud. The first volume, Ways of Reason, begins with analysis of the Talmudic text. It explains how extremely concise language of the rabbis can be expanded into a clear and orderly understanding. Its goal is reading and understanding to attain knowledge of all the various fields of the Talmudic law. But in the second work, the Book of Logic, investigate in a systematic way the appropriate procedure for handling concepts with the forms and structures provided by a system of Torah logic. In this way, Moshe Luzzatto uncovers the foundations of the language of our sages. So this is a deeper understanding of these three works. And we should know that there's three foundations, because there are three functions of the mind, to analyze the mind. As the Ramchal describes them, each one has a unique and distinct character. Let's say that this analysis is a very deep analysis of how the human mind works. And how can we know that what we are working on is the truth? How do you reach truth? So the first mental function is the gathering of facts and understanding them. This is what the fact. Some say this, the significance of the word chokhmah, koachmah, to understand the different things that exist. This is a passive process of absorbing and taking note of whatever happens in our thoughts and through our senses, through the mind and through the five senses, and ordering those things according to rules and definitions that are already established and correct in our eyes. The second function, the creative one, what's generally called bina, it is a fuller and more intuitive understanding of how one thing leads to another. This we call it analysis. Analysis which can lead then to a synthesis. In other words, any idea a person has is a thesis. Now you want to understand the thesis more, use the power of bina to understand what it means on a deeper level through analyzing it. And then that brings you through the synthesis. Anyway, he calls this the creative power of new ideas as an outgrowth of what was already accepted as a known fact. He goes even further to create entirely new rules, new definitions, replacing the old ideas that were formerly fixed in our minds. New ideas arise out of novel or unanticipated interrelationships between concepts. These two functions are really different at their root. The excitement of new ideas can sometimes interfere with straightforward understanding. But still, they do work, one complements the other. The third function of the mind is judgment and decision-making. A person can make analysis of different ideas, but doesn't mean to say he can make a decision. What is actually true, practically. Just as there is a part of the mind for the simulation of ideas and understanding, another part creating new ideas, the third independent part devoted to decision-making. We use a delicate balance to weigh precisely what we're prepared to believe and accept against what we are inclined to reject and disbelieve. This activity, evaluating and forming opinions, often works in a light and hasty manner. It has elements of ego and emotional drives mixed into it. It's also the starting point for all action. We can readily see how the balance of our judgment is easily swayed, tilted widely in every direction by different weights, large and small, that are placed upon its scales. So these three functions of the mind, which make up the sum total of all our thinking. So, However, this is how we can then understand the way in which our sage of blessed memory established the Talmud, the two branches. First is mastery of the text called Gifsa. Second, mastery of conceptual analysis is Svara. And there's additional aspect of balancing it, coming to a decision. So this is the way in which we work. We're going to work out now, beginning with the book of Derech Tevunot, the ways of reasoning. You have any questions? I want to perhaps to make it more simple, this way of thinking. We say in the morning, before the Pesukei de Zimra, the bride of Rabbi Ishmael. And as we have in the Torah, Shibichta and Bar Peh, we have different laws of what we're supposed to do, which are given to us, either in the text of the written text or in the oral traditions. And then the 13 principles, Torah nidreshet bahem, it's where we have to apply our mind creatively. As we take the text, but I'll only give an example from the first and the last. The first one is Kal Vachomer. There are many things written in the text from which you make a deduction. We say deduction from the mind, called a fortiori. If we find a certain law is mentioned with regard to, let's say, damage which is done by bulls, by animals, wild animals, tamed animals, then we say, well, the same principle will apply if damage is done, similar principle, to see if they are the same, which is done, let's say, by cars, because driving a car causes damage. Not mentioned in the Chumash by car directly, but we can deduce from it, make a deduction. We know that a car can be destructive even more than animals. When something goes wrong, it can kill people. Just like when you go to a bull with a red flag, and then the bull gets into a rage, the question is, who's responsible? One of you with the red flag, or the bull himself, the owner of the bull. So all these matters, they're deductions. Today, let's say, so many laws concerning Shabbat are learned through deductions, Kal Vachomer, or Mamatzinu. Mamatzinu is a direct analogy. Then you have, the last one is, give you an example, what have you two verses of the Chumash that contradict one another? Then what you have to do, it says, any of you know what it says?
Find a third.
You have to search hard to find a third one which gives you a solution or a decision between the two apparently opposing verses.
Tiebreaker.
Huh?
Tiebreaker.
Yeah. So these are principles. I want to explain that in this concept of use of the mind, it also has its parallel in the Kabbalah. Although these works, these works are strictly logical of the Ramchal, he doesn't refer directly to the Kabbalah, but indirectly, if you compare to his other works of the Kabbalah, you see you have a similar concept. Otherwise, when you have Chochmah, Bina, Vadat, then you have Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet, you also have opposing principles that exist with Hashem's relationship to man, and also with the human character. It's easy for us to understand it psychologically, but perhaps more theologically. Let's apply it psychologically. Chochmah, Bina, Vadat, psychologically, are like we say Hashem is the mind of the universe, human beings become part of that mind. That mind is also to absorb knowledge as Chochmah. Bina is to analyze it, means to understand the difference between one situation and another situation. And then the third element, da'at, is to balance it. It's the achra b'nehem. Where you have chesed, gevura, tivera. Chesed is the power, outgoing, extrovert power of giving, loving kindness. You have gevura, which is self-discipline, and you have tiveret, emet, which is the balance between the two. So these are concepts that the Moshe Haim Luzzatto develops with more esoteric language based on the Arizal and the Zohar in his other works. But here we're going to deal with it quite simply. So just to make a little start, if you turn to the page which I've left you here, this is the introduction, Derech HaKodesh B'Yam HaTalmud, the holy path in the sea of the Talmud, which gives us the ability to navigate the Talmud. Now, I've given you these pages. You can at the same time also learn Hebrew, because this Hebrew is, each word is chosen and is it's considered one of the most beautiful developments of the Hebrew from the Mishnah, which he developed, of course, also using Talmudical concepts. Chemda, so Derech HaKodesh means the way of holiness, B'Yam HaTalmud, in the sea of the Talmud. Chemdat Yidiyat Emet, he says, the desire for the knowledge of truth. The truth is, every person is looking for truth, but often misses truth. So the desire to know the truth, the inyan tivi, ela nefesh hasichlit hazot, this is the natural faculty of the intelligent soul, a shabonu which exists in every one of us. Now, this assumption, and we're talking not about, unfortunately, some human beings who've got brain dysfunction and so on, but someone who is healthy in his mind, he certainly searches for truth. That's one part. Often things distract him from the truth, but he's got it inside himself. Ad shelo yimatzeh adam bari b'sichlo. You won't find any human being who's healthy in his intelligence, shelo yit'ametz, who won't work hard, v'yishtadel kefi koach hasichot shelo, and he will try, according to the power of intelligence that he possesses, the galot otab, to reveal that truth, binyanim she'izdamin lo, in any matters that come to him, lahashkif alehem, mishkafayim, glasses, lahashkif, to look at them. V'litchot hasheker l'chachakoli, any falsehood which he sees, he'll keep away from it. Whatever, it applies in simple matters and in complex matters. A person has got this power within him. And if this truth will become revealed in all matters, then if it would so open, just like you see tables and chairs, you see different things going on in the world, the only development of a person would have to be in looking carefully at everything. And if he looks carefully, he hears carefully, he uses all his senses to look at things, he thinks that's the truth. That would be enough. It would be enough for him just to look out and allow his senses to absorb all aspects of human existence and existence around the human being. Therefore, we constantly become wiser. However, we see this is not so. Not from the point of view of the concept, nor from the point of view of the one who receives the concept. In truth, there's no existence where there are not many different aspects which seem to be true. Some exist in the object itself, and some don't exist in the object. Derech Mashal, for example. Give the example of a table. Tzura Shulchan. Midat Orko V'Rokko. You can measure the length and the breadth of the table. These are aspects which exist in the table itself, and person says, I know what the table looks like. It enters in my mind, I know what the table is. But there are other things where it's a question, what to use it for. There are some things, they don't exist externally, they exist in the table itself, tashmisho, how to use it, shivuyav, its value, uzman heosoto, hein v'chinot chutz mimeno. These are aspects outside the table. What's the use of the table? Today let's go even further. Of course, even truth is, even the knowledge of the table, and I'll analyze it a bit further, just to show you there's two different aspects. My knowledge of the table is not what I see. What I see, that means passively. What I see at the moment is the top of the table. But if I want to look at the table with a more creative aspect, I'll say, what I see of this table, who says that's the whole table? Let me look underneath. Let me look from all sides. And then I get a picture of the total 3 dimensions or 6 dimensions, six directions of the table. The picture of the table in my mind, which I've created in my mind, is a combination which I'm making of the things that my eyes have seen. It's not just the eyes. You see just the eyes, just like a photograph, you see just the top of it. Well, we know the photograph doesn't show you the whole table. To see the whole table, you've got to look from all sides. Then my knowledge of the table is different. And certainly, my understanding of the use of the table differs from person to person. So, of course, today this goes much further. For example, my knowledge of the state in which we are at the moment is that we're sitting still in a room. But my creative knowledge, which comes through studying the science of movement, I know we're moving at enormous speed. The whole of the globe is moving. Aretz, it's called Aretz, always running, it's moving, but we don't feel it. So that's already part of my knowledge that we're really not stationary, but we're moving swiftly on this earth, but the earth is moving. So therefore, we may be stationary on this earth, but the earth itself and the atmosphere is moving at a great speed. Also, I happen to know that the solid material of the table is made up of atoms, molecules and atoms, which is a state of motion also. So therefore my scientific knowledge of the table is something quite different to the table and to the position of the table, which I see with my senses. So this concept, we develop it further. We leave this for the next year. So, if you've got any questions on this subject, could be on any subject.
The inordinate ratio of Jewish contribution to science, literature, mathematics, etc., is not genetic, because when you taught at Manchester Prep, you taught Goyim as well. So it is the study and the analyzation of Gemara that would be the explanation for the Jewish contribution. Is that correct?
Yes. By the way, that just add another point, that Rashi says the Torah only needs to begin with Parshat HaKodesh, this first passage given the whole Jewish people. In that passage, which describes Pesach, it also describes the 4 sons, questioners. So we see right at the beginning of giving the Torah to the people of Israel, Hashem said, you've got to become a people that is questioning. You've got to be prepared for it. Because the essence of the development of the human personality comes from the power of the mind. The power of the mind means you've got to be searching truth and asking questions. And therefore, all the mitzvot are introduced, as it were, through the questions that the young minds will put to the older minds. And therefore you have to prepare yourself not just to accept truth externally, but to search for truth, because this is the way whereby the nation of Hashem can develop to use the search for truth in order to bring a higher level to every aspect of human life.
So you must continue to question the assumed truths that are existent in the world.
Yeah.
Take nothing for granted.
That's right. Once a guy should teach